Hi, I'm Pastor Ken Shorley at the Market Street Presbyterian Church in Lima, Ohio, and I'm recording a series of videos called Wanderings in the Wilderness with Pastor Ken. I don't know if you've ever heard the joke about bats in the Belfry, but the joke goes something like this. Out in a country church, they experienced an enormous amount of bats up in the Belfry. And no one knew what to do, so one individual said, I know what we can do. Let's get ladies' perfume and spray up in there, and the bats will smell the perfume, and it'll smell so good and so nice, they'll leave. So they did that, and it didn't work. Another person came along and said, well, let's do the opposite. Let's get smoke, and let's put smoke up in the Belfry, and the bats will leave. So they brought in some smokers and they smoked the Belfry, and lo and behold, the bats were still there. Another individual came along and said, hey, let's get the worst music imaginable and play it. And when the bats hear that music, they will leave. So they did that, and the bats still remain. Till finally a pastor down the road came along and said, hey, I know how you can get these bats to leave. How's that? He said, well, it's simple. Put them through your communicants class and make them members of the church, and within about a month or two, they'll all be gone. Well, we're not talking about bats in the Belfry. Today I want to talk about snakes in the Belfry. This story goes back to a time when I served a country church in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, not too far from Lexington, Virginia. We had some work done on the steeple, and when the workers were done, they began to chat with me. And they said, hey, Pastor, did you see the big snake skin? I said, no, where's it located? He said, well, at the foot of the steps going up into the balcony area. I said, you mean outside? No, inside. And lo and behold, I went to the location described, and there was a snake skin. And I measured the snake skin, and I estimated that the black snake was probably about 6 foot in length. Now the skin was located on the inside of the church door, not outside the church. Hence my conclusion was, that snake is still somewhere in this church. And so I brought in some special equipment and hid it in the sanctuary just in case on a Sunday morning that 6 foot black snake would show itself in the congregation. Now, fast forwarding the story, the snake was never found in the church or outside the church. And in addition, I acquired some more information from the gentleman who worked on the steeple, and they said it was not uncommon for them to do some pounding up in the steeple area, and that would stir up some of the snakes that dwelt in the steeple area. And then I talked to another individual who did a lot of work within the homes, and he said to me, in this area, meaning the mountains, many people have snakes living in their own homes and they don't know it. They're up in the rafter area. Now the snake was never found, but I was prepared, and I had 2 or 3 others quietly prepared to deal with it if it should occur on a Sunday morning when the congregation was at worship. The nice thing about serving now here in Lima, Ohio at Market Street Church is because we're a city church, I really don't fear having snakes in the Belfry. So that brings to mind from the book of Genesis, chapter number 3, whereby we are told what happened in the Garden of Eden. It was to be a nice setting for Adam and Eve, and it was until this happened. Genesis chapter 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes will be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to her eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and also gave unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed their fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Now, the serpent, who is really the devil or Lucifer, brought the temptation to Eve and to Adam, and they both fell. And we are subject to temptation throughout all of life. For the serpent is nearby, always wanting to tempt us. But we are told later in chapter 3 that the Messiah would crush the head of the serpent. But the serpent would bruise the heel of the Messiah. And that's the first promise of Christ coming. That Christ would be bruised in the heel. He would die on the cross, but out of his death would come victory over the serpent. You have victory. I have victory. No matter where the serpent dwells, the victory of Jesus Christ is there for you and for me and for any believer. I'd like to thank you for watching this video of Wanderings in the Wilderness with Pastor Ken. End of video.